Okay, welcome to session 4 of Do Summit Good. Really excited about this session. We've got not just one, not two, not three, but 4 great companies and individuals to have a conversation with around the state of sponsorship within the WordPress community. So this session is it's slightly different from the previous sessions. This is more of a roundtable discussion, an opportunity for all of us to have a conversation. We'd really encourage you, if you're over in the hallway track, to get involved. If you've got questions, if you've got thoughts on the state of sponsorship within the WordPress space, then feel free to drop your comments in the chat. And we'll make sure to include you in the conversation. So before we kick off, I'm just going to quickly give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves, introduce either the company or organization that they represent here today before we kick off. So over on my far right, Ronald, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, so my name is Ronald. I am the freshly appointed community manager for Yith, which stands for Your Inspiration Themes. We produce and develop WooCommerce plugins, all sorts of different functionality. Apart from that, I'm also involved in the last 2 versions of the Bristol WordCamp, as well as a co-host for the Cheltenham WordPress meetup.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and really appreciate you giving your time to be with us today.
No, it's great. Love it.
So immediately below me, I think, Tom and Laura. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
You go first.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom. I'm the People Operations Director at Pragmatic. I've been here for just coming up 6 years now. And prior to that, I'd used WordPress for a community project, an environmental campaign since about 2010. I also am one of the co-organisers of the local Brighton WordPress meetup. And for the last 3 or 4 years, depending on how long it's been running, I've been doing the sponsors for WordCamp Brighton as well, and have lots of thoughts. Looking forward to having this chat.
Fantastic, thank you.
Hey, I'm Laura. I'm the marketing manager here at Pragmatic, and I am one of the people responsible for deciding which WordCamps or WordPress initiatives that we sponsor. And also, I was a lead organizer for WordCamp Brighton in 2018, and I've been involved in both our local WordUp or a WordPress meetup and other WordCamp Brightons.
Fantastic, and again, thank you. I really appreciate the pair of you both being joining us today. Kind of down here in the middle of my screen. Apologies, I've tried so many times and I've just got such a problem with pronouncing names.
Give it a shot.
Oh, I can't.
I'm making you suffer.
I just seem to stumble over names I can't pronounce. Sorry.
I'm Taeke. I'm Taeke Reijenga.
Thank you.
I'm the founder and CEO of Level. We're a full-service WordPress agency from Rotterdam, the Netherlands. Personally, I'm a speaker on meetups and WordCamps. My company is hosting the local Rotterdam meetup, and we're also sponsoring that in some speaker gifts and stuff like that. I've been organizing WordCamp Rotterdam for a couple of years, and last year, I got involved with WordCamp Europe in the sponsors team. This year, I'm the sales lead of WordCamp Europe 2020 in Porto, where the sales team sponsorships is part of that. We have a new structure, and so I'm dealing with sponsorships again. Yeah,
fantastic. And that's quite a big one, isn't it, in terms of the responsibility around a WordCamp? So yes, excellent, thank you. And over on my far right, which is far left on the screen, Thomas, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, I think you're muted, Thomas. I can't hear you. No, we've got no audio. Oh, you were there a moment ago, weren't you? No, Thomas, do you want to drop out and come back in and see if we've got the audio back on there? Excellent. We're going to have these technical issues on these live events. All good. Okay, I guess let's kick off. And once Thomas comes back in, we'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself and Weglot, the company that he represents. I just want to give a quick shout out to Weglot as a company. They've recently become the latest silver friend of WP&UP, sponsoring us and enabling us to deliver mental health support into the WordPress community. So just a big thank you to them at this time. So, sponsorship within the WordPress space. We've obviously got individuals here that are represent companies that both purchase sponsorship packages, as well as individuals that need to acquire the sales of sponsorship packages from within the WordCamp and Meetup space. Oh, I think Thomas, can we hear you? We can hear you. Excellent. Fantastic. Just quickly before we go on, Thomas, do you want to just introduce yourself and Weglot?
Yes, for sure. I'm Thomas from Weglot. I'm a partnership manager there. Weglot is basically a translation plugin that will allow you to translate your website into multiple languages. If you have any questions about multilingual or just our plugin, feel free to just drop me a message on Twitter.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so as I was saying, let's kick off with a conversation around sponsorship. It would be really interesting to get the take on the challenges that we faced. I've been involved in WordCamp London myself from a sponsorship perspective. I've also have personal experience around meetups and trying to generate sponsorship as well. So I'd just be interested on people's thoughts. Do we feel that at the moment the kind of the WordPress space, the meetups, the WordCamps, do we feel it's in a healthy place at this moment in time?
If I go first, I think just speaking on as a co-organizer of the last Bristol WordCamp, we did stress a little bit on raising funds because things are really expensive, and delegates or ticket sales is an important part, as well as the sponsorship to make the economics work. At the end, it was all fine, but it was a very stressful and last-minute call. I think from the other side, as a sponsor, it's also a really important part to get involved with communities. It's really nice platform to speak and engage with users, with your users and with new users, but also giving back within that community, because the community is what WordPress is all about, and without that there would be no business for many of us, probably for all of us really. So to be able to give something back within that open source community is a really important part. And I can actually quote our CEO, because I literally just asked him, what's so important for you about sponsoring WordCamps and WordPress? And making it a healthy community is absolutely paramount.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that side of it kind of gets lost sometimes when you're talking about return on investment. People want to see sort of an immediate, how many numbers, what stats can you give me that am I going to get immediately from this event? And I think sometimes we forget the actual core reason why we're putting on WordCamps is to support the local communities and provide a space for people to share and learn about WordPress. I think when I've been trying to get sponsors, I've focused a lot on the sort of the return on investment, and that maybe isn't there. I don't know, as a sponsor, Laura, you probably got a different take on that. But
I think, for us as an agency, like selling WordPress development and design, the return on investment for us is like not as straightforward as potentially it is for like any hosting or plugin companies, where you can measure maybe like signups. So we know that by sponsoring a WordCamp or a local meetup, it's highly unlikely we're going to, for the type of audiences they attract, we're not going to sell them a new website build. However, one area that it's really, if you do need to justify return on investment, I think is hiring. So I think, Tom, you've picked up quite a few people at WordCamps, and I think if when you do have to justify it as part of your budget, and to your, like, if you've got a finance director and they want to know, oh, what's this, £2,000 going to get us back? And it's really hard to justify, well, it's about giving back, it's like really good for the community. And whilst they get that, they're obviously thinking about numbers and money, and that's very important. And it can be quite difficult sometimes to convey what the real benefit is, especially if you're not currently hiring, which we often go and sponsor, and we haven't necessarily got any positions open at that time.
Can I ask you a question, Laura? Sorry to jump in. Do you find creating a local healthy WordPress community, because you also organize the meetups, does that help your business in recruitment and also in sales, in maybe the long term? Can you justify it in that way?
Yeah, so I think our local meetup definitely helps with recruitment, and also there's another benefit which I haven't actually mentioned, is partnerships with other local businesses, or maybe not necessarily that local, and if the WordPress community, what's so great about it is like how much we share information. It doesn't really feel like super competitive, which is like I still find quite bizarre, but brilliant. And so it's a really good way to like pick up new connections. If we've got a piece of work that isn't quite suitable for us, we've met people at local meetups and WordCamps, and we can pass it on to them, and vice versa.
Yeah, for us, for Level, it's basically the same as you're dealing with it. I think also like dealing with it internally, like how can you justify spending this money? We see it probably more as a recruitment strategy, like showing that you're out there, that you're involved in the community. That's why we also want to be on stage. We want to, share knowledge, the cool things that we work on that are usually a bit more edge case than in general. I think that goes for you guys at Pragmatic as well.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, the partnerships are really valuable. Like we see companies around us that are kind of, let's call it startups. Like they're eager, they take on any cool job. So if I have a good feeling on a job, but I can't have it right now, or I can't, or it doesn't really fit the profile. It's great to have some partners around you where you can just say, hey, is this something for you? And why don't you take it on? And my recommendation is still really valuable to the end client, I would say. And then I'm also on the other side trying to raise loads of money for WordCamps, WordCamp Europe, especially, which is a costly one. And then you're a lot more, I think, on the economic side of things, and less you just need to raise a certain budget, and the discussions are slightly different, but being a sponsor as well, I think it does give me an advantage in showing some of the other aspects to take into account when justifying a certain investment or sponsorship to take on.
Is it easier to get sponsorship for big WordCamps than it is for local WordCamps?
In my experience, yes. In the last 2 years that I was involved in WordCamp Rotterdam, trying to get sponsors in, and also with or knowing that there's a sort of a desire to have more smaller WordCamps, that you see that the local companies or maybe the Dutch ones here, they are kind of trying to pick which one serves them best or so. So they're not gonna spend their money 5 times. So they're trying to pick the best one. So for the last 2 years in Rotterdam, we didn't meet the budget that we needed. For Europe, I'm pretty positive that we will meet budget this year. So I would say that's easier, being a flagship event, a lot more exposure. Yeah.
Is it because of the numbers that attendees? It's I
think that really helps. Yeah, and the international exposure around it, just the people attending, people watching in live streams. I think it's that plus all the other perks. Yeah.
I
think also
we're creating... Sorry. I was just saying, do you think we're creating a bit of a problem for ourselves here?
I would say so. Yeah, with having more and more, that's a discussion that we've been having in the Netherlands, that we had a WordCamp in the Netherlands for some years. And then we were told to have local WordCamps, and not one big one anymore. And the Netherlands is only small, and the community, we basically have a list we can call each other. And of course, it's about increasing that community and welcoming new people to that community. And there's a way in doing that with local WordCamps, but not having the bigger WordCamp the Netherlands anymore. That kind of hit us. It had an effect in the community, and you see that after some years in trying to do so, the numbers they're not right. We're not reaching so many more people that justifies having budgets that don't meet. And I mean that goes for Rotterdam. I know that Nijmegen has been raising their targets and stuff like that. So it's not that, maybe it's just I just did a bad job. I don't know.
I think that's something that we've seen. What I've seen from running the Brighton WordCamp, which is much smaller than the London one, and I'm sure Dan, you have people queuing up to sponsor London, and we're 45 minutes away on the train. So the question is, do we need to do one down here? Can we give the value to the local community, or are they going to travel up to London to do that? And I think we've been discussing locally, how do we do it next year? Because like you, Taeke, we've struggled with the budget this year, and I think we're looking at ways to really scale back what we need to spend to still give the local community something to go along to, and try and not make it such a big thing that we need to spend so many hours trying to get budget, when actually the networking and the meeting people can be done on a much shorter budget.
Definitely, I agree with that. I think every WordCamp is trying to reinvent the wheel a little bit. They want to make a statement like, hey, look at us. We got this amazing venue, and our food is better than any other WordCamp that you attended before. We all want to make some sort of a statement. I think in the Netherlands, you can actually just have a ton of meetups that have maybe raise 30, 40, 50 people, get them together, welcoming new people to the community, have like a really low barrier. You hardly need budget for that. That also works. And then in the Netherlands, in our case, we wanted to have this like one big WordCamp, or one central WordCamp where the whole of the Netherlands could come together. And I do know that something is being organized for 2020. So I think that we made a point, and we had some people in the community here that Marcel Bootsman, for example, that really stood up like, hey, we should be able to do this again. And so we're allowed to do that now. But we, with Rotterdam, decided not to organize one this year, also to kind of not be in the way of another one, or to allow other ones to stand up, basically.
Would it be an idea to create some sort of package for a nationwide? So, for example, all UK WordCamps, you can pay into it $5,000, and you sponsor all 5 or 6 of them that are happening. So everybody gets a bit of a share. Would that be appealing?
So a bit like the sort of global, like the global sponsor.
Probably, but more on a local level.
On a smaller level, I think that's potentially a good idea, because the pressure of, as a lot of us around here know, the pressure of organising a WordCamp is like enormous. Even without, even if you got given the full budget, it would still be really stressful. So having that bit extra guaranteed for you would be really good. But I think we need to look at ensuring that sponsors are getting a lot from the WordCamps as well. Like I think as an attendee as well, I've almost become blind to some sponsors. I see them at every WordCamp.
It's like banners on the website, right?
We got Yith, though.
No,
just to be clear.
no.
We got.
But you see them at every WordCamp, and you've already spoken to them once. So what's going to make you speak to them again? And Thomas, I'm sure, like maybe
yes. What is really crazy is that we have sponsored all these WordCamps, so WordCamp Brighton, Bristol, and Rotterdam, and we wasn't even aware of this struggle. So maybe we need to bring awareness to those specific topics to sponsors.
Because I think that's a really good point that you both made there about, you know, how often do we actually ask and review what the sponsors want
Exactly.
and I feel like having a national group where you can call and share resources, so that you don't have to all go and get your individual swag printed, your individual marketing material done. You know, we could. There's some fantastic work. I know WordCamp London did some really fantastic work around sustainability. You know, not producing so much swag and sharing it around and making that much easier would be definitely something that a nationwide group or collective could do better. I think that's a really good idea.
I think it's really important. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that then if we do something like that, it's really important that the local community or representatives are being heard and are playing a role in that, in how to deal with a budget or how to deal with swag for like that can be used countrywide or something like that. Because what we really see is that the scale of the US, where that's often compared, that doesn't add up if you compare to how the Netherlands works and the community in the Netherlands. We're tiny. So if you set a rule for, you know, when you have a talk about states and people like drive for hours just to visit their neighbors, for example, here you're in a new country, you're in our neighboring country, you know. So we should have local involvement in a sort of a program like that as well, I think.
I think the other side of a WordCamp as well is the cost. I think some WordCamps do very well in keeping costs down by not having to buy camp-wide swag, for example. That's a big one. But also work together with universities and colleges. The last one I went in Nijmegen, or not the last WordCamp, but the one in Nijmegen, they did really well by involving a local college and therefore bringing down the cost, and the same for Dublin as well, and give something back to their students and therefore gain a very cheap deal in using their location. I know it's not possible for everybody and in every city, but I think as a community, being creative and keeping costs low, bringing in sponsors at a reasonable level, so you don't feel you have to spend thousands and justify the return on your investment. It works sort of both ways from both sides. And I feel like WordCamps are going through sort of a period of reinventing themselves, because it probably had quite an easy ride with getting lots of ticket sales. Now, you know, those who've been involved in WordCamps have been going for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Still a great community. But maybe there's something else. We bring in new people to sell more ticket, or do a smaller camp, but be more theme specific, either on e-commerce, for example, or working with other players. So to reinvent the WordCamp format to make the economics work.
It's something we've certainly discussed at London at great length, actually. This issue of are we, through being inclusive to some degree, creating exclusivity, because we're actually creating a situation where we're not satisfying anybody across this. I mean, this is coming away really from the sponsorship side, but that what you mentioned there, Ronald, about that having a more focused style event. So if you were looking at, say, e-commerce as a specific, obviously the intention of a WordCamp is really to try and be quite inclusive and cover a very broad range of topics. Obviously, WordPress is such a wide spectrum of knowledge and expertise across WordPress that it can be really quite difficult to create an event that has that very kind of specific focus, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that also this, again, we're going off sponsorship slightly and talking about ticket sales, but if you've got a schedule and you're really focused on e-commerce, or you're an e-commerce developer, and there's only 1 or 2 talks about e-commerce, it's even like the small ticket price that we charge of like £30 or £40, that if they have to travel, that instantly ramps up costs. Brighton, it's not a cheap place to come and visit at all.
No.
And you leave.
Fun though.
I don't.
Yes.
It's fun though, traveling there.
I mean, I think it's worth it. We have lots of glitter, as Dan.
No, you didn't. You mentioned the glitter.
Sort of specific topics, though, I think dragging it back to sponsorship. If you're a sponsor, if you can be much more targeted with your who you're approaching to sponsor. So, you know, for example, if you're a WooCommerce plugin or an add-on or subscriptions or whatever, you're going to sponsor a WooCommerce event, and you're going to get much more engaged audience. Likewise, if you're going to be focusing it on users, you know, plugins and hosting that is suited toward the individual is going to be much more targeted. So I think there's definitely pros and benefits for the sponsors for a more targeted event as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to bring in a couple of the comments from the chat from the audience that are joining us. Michelle Frechette, who's actually going to be joining us a bit later, says that sponsors that make it possible for anyone to attend a WordPress event are the companies I look to first for making purchases. If you're giving back to the community, I'm much more likely to support you too, which I think is a really interesting take. Any thoughts across that at all?
Yeah, I'm going to use that immediately. Selling packages.
I think from a recruitment point of view, if I see an agency that is sponsoring the event, giving people time to put on the event and putting speakers forward, that's like, it makes me think that they've got quite a holistic view to the community. I think if I just see them attending and or putting forward speakers, it shows that they've got quite a single aim here, and it's about publicity and not necessarily supporting the wider community. It's about just getting the names out, not pointing any fingers here at all, but it's I think you've got to look at it holistically, and I think exactly as you're saying, Dan, it shows that you're thinking about the wider community, and it's not just about whatever you can get out of it. It's a wider thing.
Absolutely. I think, and going back to the comments here from within the live chat, Topher really raises an interesting discussional point. So I'll read this out. It's quite a longer one, but I'll read through. So far, the discussion has been around small-scale sponsorship of single events. Could we have a discussion around larger-scale ongoing sponsorship? For example, Jill Binder is spinning up an initiative to train women around public speaking and is looking for an annual salary, basically. How does one raise sponsorship at that scale? What organizations are capable of sponsoring that sort of thing? This kind of taking it to scale, it's certainly something that certainly us at WP&UP are facing and have had to deal with. How do we take what is a relatively large scale problem? So obviously Topher has mentioned Jill Binder and had the diversity within tech and the fantastic work that she's doing. Similarly across WP&UP within the mental health space, we've got. How do we approach these bigger sponsorship problems that we can face?
It's a difficult one, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, you are looking at companies that have a quite a decent cash flow, but I think even the bigger companies, they are looking as well. Yes, I want to put back in, and I think the giving 5% back into Make WordPress, and whether community and WordCamps is all part of that, or diverse speaker, which I believe it is. Are we then maybe only looking at the top 1% of WordPress companies that can afford such? And I don't know what sort of figure we're looking at, but bigger budgets, bigger global sponsorships obviously cost a bit more. So do they have a responsibility, and should we force people to invest in that, or do we need to sell? Why is it a good reason for them to sponsor and in a way invest back into the community? I do think organically, if this happens, and probably just getting the word out is already a really good start. It gets most certainly people thinking of, actually, this could be a really good way.
Yeah, I think something that we've already discussed a couple of times in this conversation is ROI, that return on investment. And for many years, if we go back 6, 7, 8 years ago in the WordCamp space, it was almost entirely about giving back. The companies that are sponsoring were giving back to the community, and that term ROI felt like a bit of a dirty term, to be honest. It felt like something we couldn't really discuss.
But how do you measure that as well? Do you measure it straight on signups and how many people sign up to your hosting or premium plugins? For us, it's not like that. It's what we've earned, and we're going to reinvest that the next year. So, for next year, we have a budget, or no, I know the number, but I'm not going to say it. But it's a huge 6-figure budget we can put back into the community, either through WordCamps or local meetups, or sending people, and also our own little community of our own developers, or the immediate place where we have our main offices. That's also a little bit of community where we rely on. So it's do you start from the center, or are you looking at global, bringing it all back down to your own? It's a question that many people have to answer.
Yeah, I think it's really. We're a small company in the grand scheme of things in WordPress space, and I think we have to be really, really selective about where we invest our money in the giving back side of things. And we've got several objectives, I suppose, from attending WordCamp. So obviously, publicity-wise, we want to be able to speak at them, and sponsorship. We would like our logo around, and the links on the website. Stuff. But we also obviously use them to train our staff, networking, connections and that. And when as someone who controls that budget, I would if I could give my budget to support the fantastic initiatives what we've just talked about then, like WP&UP, I absolutely would. But I've also got, my job is to promote Pragmatic and make sure they're getting we've got to get publicity for what we're investing in. And when I often try and kill two birds with one stone as such. If we can sponsor a WordCamp that we're already attending, we've already got a speaker slot at, that make I can whatever £2,000 sponsorship investment, then it goes a lot further because we're doing all these other things at the same time. It's the more that so it's a small pot, and it gets, the more it gets diluted, the less impact that we'll sort of receive back, I kind of feel. And again, I really, really hate to say it, because I would absolutely love, it's not like I don't think that these initiatives deserve it. It just comes down to money, and it's so hard to be able to do that.
I think so on that point there, you mentioned impact there, Laura, and I think going back to Topher's original question, which is about how do we get this to scale, and talk, about things like employing someone full time. And I think that when you're looking at other sources of finance, so grants, funding, it's all about what impact you can prove rather than the financial return. So I think there's pots of money out there in Europe. That's a bit of a strange one for us Brits to be talking about, but there's grants and funding out there, and if we can make it easy for people to show the impact that work's having on, so if we're talking about diversity and inclusion, how can we as WordCamp organisers make sure we're giving that data back, showing the work that impact that work's having, and that would certainly help. But I think it's not for 50, like Laura says, for a 50-person agency like ours, we employing someone or giving that kind of investment is beyond our reach. But
would you be willing to pay a percentage into that pot that then funds an individual? Because that might be the solution to.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice idea and a really nice way of doing it.
Whatever you can afford, whether it's a 1% of that budget or 5%, and if a few companies do that. But then, of course, the next question is who then decides who gets that money for what cause? is that anonymous? Is that?
No,
I think there's a discussion around WordCamps themselves in terms of the intention of a WordCamp is to be local, and actually, do we need to be focused more locally on the sponsorship? There's kind of the regular companies that we see. If you attend a lot of WordCamps, you tend to see the same companies again and again and again.
Yeah.
Do we need to be looking at other companies within the local area to support outside of the kind of the traditional space, if you like?
We've been trying that in Rotterdam, and it's really hard to kind of get the message across because they're not in this community. They're not really aware of how the community functions, how it works. And we actually decided one year to sort of give preference to local. We also had a sustainability theme. So it's all about local produce, local vendors and all that. So why not focus on local sponsors as well? It turned out to be impossible. We really need the bigger ones with the budgets to help out on this. And Yoast Academy and some of the hosting companies, Weglot, the companies that really chip in to make these things happen. And in the end, maybe we had 5% like truly local sponsors on that year. So that was not really working for us.
Is there something that we can do as a WordPress community to educate the wider business community about the impact that we can potentially have here? I mean, we're talking about a sizable event.
We could put banners on all their websites to show that they're built on WordPress, and just for
we can, yeah.
Yes, we can. I think the idea of getting this message out to different business, I guess, is something I'm talking about here, because we tend to see the same businesses over and over and over again. And there was something I've seen it a couple of times at a couple of WordCamps this year, and it's maybe a little bit sad, if I'm honest, because we've seen some rather big companies come into the space, and I'm not going to name any particular names, but they've come in. We know that they've got big marketing budgets behind them, but then they don't have representatives at the event. So it means that they've bought these top level packages, but their stands then sit empty, or there is no stand. And suddenly that starts to take away from the WordCamp, because for me, I spend a lot of time in the hallway track. I want to be socializing with my friends and meeting new people, and I do that in the hallway track where we see the sponsors. If suddenly that sponsor space starts to be more and more empty because these big top level packages are taken by these big companies that they then feel that they don't need to, or for whatever reason, don't send representatives.
Something I noticed in the year that I organised WordCamp Brighton was we had quite a lot of people inquire about sponsorship, but they wanted to be a virtual sponsor. So they wanted the cost of the package knocked down slightly because they're not having a stand, they're not taking, from their position, they're not taking up space, but they wanted like all the perks maybe of the tier above, because and I mean, we were in a really tight financial position, and we accepted that, and I didn't feel particularly good about it at all, but I also knew that without that money, the WordCamp couldn't go ahead.
Yeah, I really like what Thomas did this year at WordCamp Brighton, where they asked it was going to be not possible for them to attend, but they asked us to find someone to represent the company locally, so keep supporting the local community. And I don't know about what you thought, Thomas, but I thought that worked really well. And,
yes, it was quite awesome, and the great fact about that is that we are still in touch with our ambassador. She's now our ambassador, and we had great feedbacks from her, and it's really awesome to have somebody who's already involved in the community to actually represent you, and because she obviously knows how it goes there. And I mean, it was an awesome experience at the end of the WordCamp. And yes, it's all about creating strong bonds, and right now we are still in touch with her, and we feel like we have a deeper connection within the Brighton community right now, and even with other community that we are actually involved because of this kind of tiny little things.
Cool.
So I can say that.
It's been really interesting.
I just need to go and grab my plug really quickly. My piece is going down. Bye.
How about Leo's comment about sort of a speaker? Sorry, I can't read and quote what he's saying, but I thought that's quite an interesting take as well, that as sponsors, whether they should have a bigger say in the program, or should that be done by the organizers? I don't know what you think of that.
Because I thought that was a great idea. And a couple of years ago, we did debate that in the team around could they put on a workshop related to their product. I think a lot of other conferences that are a lot more commercial than WordCamps, that's included in the package. You get a slot on the stage to show off your whatever it is. If it's a cooking one, they're doing a cooking demonstration up there, that kind of stuff. And I don't see that as a problem as long as it's not expensive, or they get, that's a good opportunity. Maybe something we could explore and as in terms of raising the profile.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think there's an interesting, just going back a little bit on, and sorry, apologies, but I've personally been to, I think, 4 WordCamps where I've seen Weglot ambassadors at the WordCamps. And it's meant that obviously we've had individuals there that are representing the companies. Adam has raised a really interesting point, Adam Warner, in the chat there, speaking as an employee of a global sponsor, and the one planning and attending event presence, getting out to more than 10 to 12 events in person can be a hurdle. So there is this issue. There's this kind of the human side of what we're talking about here, exactly, and the kind of the representatives of it, the challenges that it brings.
And I reckon Tess would come in at this point and say, how about the environmental impact as well? Mm-hmm. Listening to a previous talk.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think this kind of local ambassadors provide theory around the supporting the events is fantastic, provided the individuals are obviously educated and understand the product they're talking about. So if that's so it's a really interesting model to create more sustainability.
Yes, of course.
So I think there's so many kind of questions around all of this, and it's such an interesting topic. It's really hard to kind of. It's certainly not something that we're going to resolve, and I guess there's a question: is there something we need to resolve? Is there a problem here? Are we trying to resolve something that isn't a problem? I don't know whether we're.
I do think that I know it's been quite local WordCamp focused, but I do think that there is local WordCamps are at risk if the current model of how they're set up is, if we continue with those. We do need to think more creatively as organisers on how we can offer a better experience, for our attendees, our sponsors, and probably ourselves. But as a lot of organising WordCamp is a big task, and the idea of then reinventing the shape of it is quite that in itself is quite daunting. So it'd be nice, I think, for the community to get together a bit more to further these discussions and how we can all chip in and help make a difference. I definitely think that I've been involved with WordCamp Brighton since the first one. How old is it now? 4 5? Yeah. And it's got harder and harder every year to get sponsors and to get enough money to make it run. And we've looked at using the local universities and stuff, and it just hasn't been possible. They've never been very receptive to the idea, and it's been a nightmare to get in touch with.
I'll tell you a story at WordCamp Europe, but it's definitely one not for the conference, about the local universities' involvement and their use of WordPress. But they were anti-WordPress, but then realised that a big chunk of their sites were built on WordPress.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that going back a bit where we have the conversation about that, the kind of local focus and so on. With London, for example, this year, so 2019, we actually oversold our sponsorship package and had to turn away sponsors. We got to that point where we physically couldn't fit any more sponsors in because we'd already oversold, and it makes me a little bit sad there, because you think, well, actually, can we do something there to support other? I know that the profits that were made from that event went back into the central pot and obviously do go to support further WordCamps, but you kind of wonder if there's a need for supporting slightly more local. So instead,
I think
of
rebalancing the books is a really good point there, because local WordCamps can be quite expensive if you calculate the cost per person versus a bigger WordCamp, because you get more support, you do get more sponsorship. But I think from a sponsor point of view, going and attending local WordCamps has a lot of benefits too, because it's a smaller group. You do get to speak to pretty much everybody, and you feel then part of that little local community. So for me, attending Brighton, even though on paper you could say, well, actually, return on investment was terrible, but actually, for my personal feeling and engaging with the community, has been probably by one of the more beneficial and a really good investment, because you do speak with people from different other communities. Sorry to say it like that, it wasn't that bad, but you know what I mean. It's and I think a lot of bigger sponsors might think like that as well, because they look at how many people are attending, think, well, that's 150 or 200 versus the sponsorship package per person is going to cost X, Y, and Z. Actually, London is far better for me as a company, but going to reach out to the different local WordCamps from a personal experience. So I'm anyway selling it for companies that might consider, shall I go local, shall I go a bigger or Europe or US. I'd say consider that, because you do get a lot more out of it. You can't really put a price tag on it.
Nice.
And you can even attend to the WordCamp. So I mean, you're not like you don't need to actually sponsor the WordCamp. You can just go there, attend, and just network and see if you have new partners there, or maybe like it can be also an alternative of supporting the community. Just attend to the WordCamp. I mean, you can always do that also, instead of actually sponsoring the WordCamp.
But we need people to sponsor them.
I don't want to repeat.
Yes, I know you won't be able to actually sponsor it, but I mean, it could be a nice way to just get involved into the community. I mean, to just be there and see actors or other local sponsor and just have a chat, and that's how you actually
something we've not really touched on in this space. I don't think we've really kind of had many, or I'm certainly not aware of many conversations. That's not to say these haven't happened. I'm sure they probably have, but we always look at sponsorship as money into the event. Well, what about sponsoring organizers? Sponsoring time. It's such a organizing a WordCamp or a meetup can be really time consuming, and that is that another valuable way of giving back and enabling these events to become more sustainable?
Yeah.
Well, I think like if it's hard for some of the local WordCamps to pay the bills of venue, food, having all the logistics there, then paying the team that's behind it, that's even that's a new challenge, like on a total different level. But then again, looking at how much time goes into organizing one or two at the same year, something like that. That is crazy. That is a lot of time that you cannot spend with your family, that you cannot spend on your work or your business or whatever. So I do think that there is something that needs to be balanced out. And if it's in paying people or in compensating in another way, I don't know. But I think the balance is a bit off there.
Yeah,
I appreciate that's a really complicated one, isn't it, in terms of the management of it. But if you've got companies that have staff that they're able to sponsor, say within to take on a role, maybe that's where some way of a way of potentially simplifying it is. I think the idea of paying individuals directly lead is unsustainable in terms of the organization of it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I am involved in this year's WordCamp Europe or 2019, 2020, and I think paying people, that would also almost be an argument to become part of the team or team leads or whatever. I think it should not be about that at all. If there's some form of compensation, okay, that would be probably more sustainable. But seeing it as a sort of a second or third job, I think that is not going to benefit any WordCamp in the long run.
I think if some companies can allow some employees a couple of hours at work, that's already a great benefit, and I think that should be recognized as well from a company, that they allow staff to spend 3-4 hours on a Friday afternoon designing, updating the local WordCamp or Meetup website as part of that community effort. And if that somehow can be flagged up and say, hey, we're spending X amount of time, and there's this 5% of giving back. If there is a formula that we can put in these different variables into it, and we can shout out a bit louder to say, yes, we do give 5% or more. It might help everybody in feeling good about themselves and about their local input they put into their community, whether it's through sponsorship or time, or even on a global level.
Yeah, I think that's easier for some than others. So I'm really lucky. Like Pragmatic let me dedicate time to organising a WordCamp. I also put in a lot of my own hours, but I was, I guess, more willing to, knowing that I also had some additional time and working hours to do this. But when it came to recruiting a team, we are Pragmatic are the largest WordPress agency in Brighton. We're the largest WordPress related company at all, anything in Brighton also. And the rest of the team, or in the year that I organised anyway, I had a few other people from Pragmatic. We can't just rely on it. Can't be, otherwise it would be our own conference. That isn't being part of the community. We can't just have all Pragmatic representatives organising. But a lot of them were freelancers. In fact, the absolute majority were. And any time that they could give was, so thankful for. But that's them then directly missing out on money for them to live. That time they spent. They could be spending it on a client project, and that's really, really hard. I'm so thankful for those who gave the time and the years that we've done it. But it's that's so difficult, and it's also, as an organizer, then really hard. When something isn't done, and you need it to get done, but the reason why is because they're working on their own, and they also have to make a living. You can't. That in itself isn't very sustainable. You can't put pressure on them, and you can't force them to do it, obviously, and you wouldn't want to.
Yeah, good go there, Laura.
I think it's really interesting that we've had this discussion, this conversation. I think that's kind of the takeaways is that there is an issue, but we need to, as a community, continue these conversations, continue these discussions to work this through and work out how we progress. We can't just stay as is. The model was born, I don't know, when was the first WordCamp? 2006, was it? 2007? Maybe a bit later than that. The model needs to continually iterate and evolve into more. And it sounds like WordCamp Europe, you've got obviously a sales team now as opposed to the sponsors team. So you've made some adjustments this year?
Yeah.
So
it doesn't really change the job that much. We just got another responsibility, and that's also selling tickets, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
We're responsible for the whole budget that we need to raise for them.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's this kind of recognition, I guess, across the community that we need to take this forward. We need to take these conversations forward and see what sponsorship within our space looks like as we progress, as we evolve. We've got so many hyper local WordCamps now, as we've mentioned. There's that stretch of the companies that we see across every, or not every, but the vast majority of WordCamps. We see these regular companies appearing. So I think it's something that we do need to tackle.
Definitely.
I'm aware that we have used up our hour. I just would like to say a huge thank you to all of you, giving your time, dedicating your time to have this conversation. Did anybody want to just drop in anything before we wrap up on this session at all?
Just correcting myself, it's 5 for the future, as WP Modder just said in the chat. And just one last thing is the next chat I'm really excited about. Topher, I'm a big fan of him and his effort into the community. So definitely.
Actually, really quickly on Topher's point, I was thinking that, again, it's not really about sponsorship, but when people buy tickets to WordCamps, you could maybe ask them if they'd donate an additional sort of $5 to another initiative that's helping to support the community in some way that isn't about that WordCamp. So I guess a bit like, you get in shops where you round up your shopping to the next pound or whatever. But again, like maybe you could do the same thing with sponsors and say, chip in an extra £100, you'll get your name up on this lovely thank you screen, and you would have done a really good thing to this initiative, which in itself is supporting the community. Anyway, someone else can run with that.
I just like to say thanks to the sponsors who are here. I think it's been, having done WordCamps for a few years now and seen how much effort goes in and how much the sponsors put into making them what they are. I think you can never say thank you enough. So well done.
Yes, no, I couldn't agree more. So thank you, and I appreciate we've got some of the sponsors in the room with us right now, both physically on the chat, but also in the live chat as attendees. So big thank you to all the companies that have enabled these events within the community.
And thank you, Dan, as well. Let's not forget you.
Yeah,
and your
thank you for raising the
to keep this going and keep moving forward. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. We are going to shut this session off now and move over to our 5th session of the day already. We'll be halfway through the event. Thank you all for taking part on this. If you are joining us on wp&up.org/live, do remember to refresh your browser in about 2 minutes' time. We'll continue the event. But for now, thank you all. Take care. Speak soon.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.